This is the 2024 Critics Panel, and I'm your moderator, Naomi Spatz. 10 years ago, the Performing Arts Initiative of OLLI started a course called Berkshire Previews, where artistic directors could present their season to OLLI members. We started with 4 or 5, and then by cutting each class in half, we were able to expand to 10, adding smaller theaters and other great performing groups like the Berkshire Opera, Jacob's Pillow, Chester, the McCaden, and Great Barrington Public Theater. A few years later, to spice up the views, we added the critics panel in the spring, where Berkshire critics could highlight what they were expecting and hoping for the summer. Then one critic, I think it was Dan Dwyer, who is now running his antique bookstore almost full time, but still writes musical reviews for a German newspaper for some unknown reason. He suggested we get together at the end of the season to discuss what we saw. And so for the last few years, that is what we have done. I would like to introduce our panelists alphabetically and add where you can find their reviews. They all have been with us for years and are well known in the Berkshires. They have all been most gracious in giving their time and analysis to OLLI members. First, we have, I think if we could remove all the heads other than the ones who are going to be participating, it might be easier for the group to follow them. When Ray is free, she can do that. But in the meantime, I'd like to introduce Peter Bergman, who writes for the Berkshire Edge and Berkshire Bright Focus. Jeff Borak of the Berkshire Eagle, the only print site for reviews we have. Macey Levin, who has disappeared but is going to be with us soon, Berkshire on Stage. Barbara Waldinger, Berkshire on Stage. Jeannie Woods, Berkshire on Stage. We are very fortunate in that each of them have had outside theatrical experience, which has nothing to do or little to do with criticism, but it adds to the richness of their reviews. First of all have been actors and even have won awards for regional theater. I think you'd be surprised to know that Jeff Borak started part of his life as an actor and has won awards for his acting and directing. All have been directors in the Berkshires and beyond. Macey has been an actor, director of his own theater. Some have been producers. Macey had a theater group on Long Island and then in Sheffield. Jeannie Woods had a theater group in Western Illinois. Peter Bergman put on 2 plays in historical institutions here in the Berkshires, Arrowhead and Edna St. Vincent Millay's house, Steepletop. Barbara Waldinger had a theater group in Hudson and now has started the OLLI Players with its first production next week, as Carol referred to. So you're all invited to that, and we wish her well and her new group. And also they were all teachers. Peter taught for Elder Hostel, now Rhodes Scholar. Macey taught high school at Hewlett High School on Long Island. Barbara was a professor at Queens College. But I think you taught French there as well, right?
Many years ago. It was a high school French, but it was college theater.
Okay. Jeannie was a professor at Western Illinois University, and under a Fulbright program, she taught recently in Taiwan and Morocco. And equally exotic, Jeff Borak taught in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, at Haile Selassie University. I am particularly fond of that reference because I have a favorite memento on my mantle, a photo of me curtsying to the Emperor Haile Selassie at his palace in Addis. My deep curtsy was a bit shaky, but he was my first and only emperor. Anyway, it is extraordinary how theater is so universal. I mean, Death of a Salesman in Morocco, think about that. Finally, all are great lovers of theater, often starting at a very young age with their first theatrical experience, taken to a play at Broadway by a parent or someone like that. I'm going to use that as the introduction for all of you, But if there's something that you want to add or correct at this point, this is a good moment. Does anyone have a correction or want to add something to my very brief bios?
I could add one thing, Naomi.
Yeah.
My first theatrical experience was at the age of 5 when I was cast as a 5-year-old in the National Company of Street Scene musical by Kurt Weill. So that was my first experience of theater.
Then I remember you started earlier, about 6 or 8 months as a baby model.
7 months,
7
right
months.
in between.
You've come a long way.
I know, I'm celebrating 78 years of working now in November.
Wow.
And
wow.
I'm 78, so.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
But we're not telling our ages here, I'm sorry. But congratulations nonetheless.
And for me, I didn't teach at Haile Selassie University. I was assistant director of the Creative Arts Center there while I was a Peace Corps volunteer.
So I think I kind of knew that, but I rather like my parallel better. Can we bend the truth for good reasons?
If you wish, sure.
Thank you.
And I just
Jeannie,
would say,
what did I screw up on you?
oh, you were accurate, but you left out that I also taught 17 years in South Carolina at Winthrop University and had my company there for 10 years, New Stage Ensemble.
Wow. All right, that's amazing. By the way, have we achieved Macey yet? Okay. Well, we're going to carry on. I hope we can get him on. This has been a very strange year, as the last two. We are presumably post-COVID, but not really. And its effects, of course, have stayed with us. I wanted to start off with a question of whether or not you've seen any trends in the theater season this year. We all got together in early this the spring, and people were looking forward to things. And after you've seen the season, is there something you took away that you noted that all things that have happened to us have produced a new trend? Anyone want to start?
Well, for one thing, there were 2 plays dealing with manic depression, which was interesting. One was a musical, Next to Normal, and one was a drama, The Islanders. So that 2 in one season is unusual, I think. And another, I think because of COVID, is that there were several plays about loneliness. I just saw The Weir yesterday, Sunday at Berkshire Theatre Group. A bunch of guys and one woman at a pub in Ireland. Very lonely people, and found sort of a family with each other. And other plays like that. And I think the theater reflects what's going on at the time. And I think
Yes.
Many of the things we've seen do that.
Definitely. By the way, I think Flight of the Monarch also dealt with the depression and suicide. I think there's on the Times. I heard something the other day, which I would like your comments on. Speaking of timely, there's one artistic director who, when asked about the program for next year, said, "We're not making any choices until after the election."
Wow.
Any comment on that?
I think that
Hopefully
speaks.
Going to start video.
Oh, I think Macey is with us.
Almost.
Almost. Well,
Start my video.
Jeff, I thought you wanted to say something about trends, no?
For me, this was an odd summer in the sense that, for me at least, I did not see any widespread trends, at least not thematically, which we've had in the past.
I see Jeff talking.
I've seen, I think we saw a lot of racial diversity in casting. non-traditional casting this summer. A lot of
Again, I
plays that were
I've got my
intermissionless,
video.
not
Clicking on
short
that.
pieces, but
Excuse me,
intermissionless.
Jeff, may I interrupt? Ray, can you take the heads off the screen of anyone who is not a speaker? Ray?
Okay, fine. Go ahead.
Ray?
I'm sorry, I was still trying to talk to Macey. We got Macey's voice. We do not have his picture. So you don't want to see anybody who is not speaking. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, please. So we
Okay.
could see the speakers and the others can join in on chat.
And if anybody would like to stop their own video, they certainly can.
Mhm.
Anybody who's not a speaker?
And there's Macey now.
Let's
Okay.
hang on.
Oh, is he showing up?
Here he is.
Here I am.
Hi, Macey.
Hi, Macey.
Yes. You can hang up now, Macey. Hang up.
Nice talking to you, Ray.
Okay, but
Right.
hang up the phone.
I'm going to. Right.
If we were putting on a play, we'd be censored. I'm sorry, Jeff. Macey, we're talking about what trends we may have seen this summer in theater, and Jeffrey was just speaking about it.
I heard him start to talk.
Thank you, Macey.
You're welcome, Jeff.
For me, at least, I mean, it's always been interesting for me over the course of a summer to look at the choices, to look at the choices that artistic directors have made as living theater. And there have been in the past certain themes that have wound up purely by chance. I know that artistic directors don't talk to and plan that out. And even within their own seasons, I know I've spoken to artistic directors on occasion and said it seemed to me that their season dealt with, they had a number of plays that dealt with an X theme, and the artistic director would say to me very often that it was not a conscious choice, but something probably as a result of what was weighing on their mind. It's felt to me, at least, that I didn't see those kinds of trends this summer. It felt to me, on the whole, a little bit of a lighter feeling. I saw much more diversity in casting. And that, I think, to me, there was much greater variety this summer. And not as much stuff that was heavyweight and burdensome. A lot of personal issues, I think, for me, but there was not on the grand scale hugely, to me at least, hugely oppressive, weighty themes. And I think this was the summer for it. And it intrigues me that an artistic director or two may be waiting until the outcome of the election to decide what their next season's going to be, because God knows what this world is going to be like if the election goes a certain way. So,
well, we might all be in the Atlas Mountains in Morocco, putting on theater with Jeannie directing us. Jeannie, you had some ideas on themes.
Right, well, going back to that isolation, I think that there are a number of plays, I'm looking at my list here. The Islanders, two people who meet in an isolated place, Dog People, The Weir, A Tender Thing, Sanctuary City, which I saw at the Hartford, and Survival of the Unfit, all seem to deal either with alienation, depression, isolation, were generally small cast, and didn't necessarily resolve any issues. They presented them and they explored them. Now, I think that Next to Normal, of course, has been around for quite a while, and it certainly deals with depression and suicide, But there is a resolution in that piece, and it was as difficult as it was to watch, a magnificent piece. And I also responded very well to Flight of the Monarch, because that Jim Frangione's play with Alan Burroughs and Karina May, because they're, again, very similar in the sense of dealing with some of the same problems, particularly isolation, alienation, and suicide or potential, but it had a resolution. And I understand there were multiple endings to it, so I think they chose the right one. I don't know what the others were, but I think all of that is kind of a hangover from not just COVID, but where COVID brought us as a country, as a world, dealing with having been forced to kind of become internal and look at problems on the inside. But going back to the larger issues of themes, I don't know. I haven't been here long enough to be able to say this season was that different. So I appreciate Jeff's comments there about how it stands up with looking with a longer perspective.
Mm-hmm. Well, Peter's been here for a while, so do you see that this season had less trends or more or none of the above?
It seemed to me actually that throughout the season, in almost every theater that I've gone to, and I go to a lot of them, there was almost the theme of biracial relationships. A lot of Black actors and actresses, a lot of shows that put together people who wouldn't ordinarily be neighbors in a particular place or time, who seemed to be interacting with one another, and I rather liked that.
Good. You know, I'm remiss. I should have mentioned that the Berkshire really is famous, and our theater groups here are famous for another thing. A few years ago, we had both Julie Boyd and Kate McGuire, who came before our class, and they talked about negotiating a model in order to be able to put on theater during COVID. I think we all thought that they were part of a national group under the American League.
No.
And the New York Times pointed out that these two women, these two fierce women, set up the model and negotiated with Actors Equity, and that was adopted sort of nationwide. And I think that's pretty spectacular.
Actually, that summer, Naomi, they were the only theaters actually producing that summer.
Really, I thought they were amazing. And I know all of you were very supportive of the various artistic directors. I mean, your life and your time, you all are so deeply involved with theater. Not to have theater would be taking away your blood. So now let's get down to things that you each enjoyed, the highlights that that you saw this season, things which you were delighted you saw, things that plays that you think in retrospect everyone should have seen, and whether or not your views changed from the spring when you were looking forward to them to now. Let's see, who would like to start that off? I see Barbara winking at me.
So, okay. One great thing for me was how many of them I liked. There's just loads of them. I was so pleased with everything that I saw. I'll start with the more recent stuff. I recently saw Primary Trust, and I had read the script, and it was just a simple story narrated by someone who certainly was facing all kinds of mental challenges, and it was beautifully done. The production. One of the things that I love about theater is when you have a production with absolutely no set, because I think with actors and an audience, that's all you need. I mean, you don't need a whole bunch of things all over the stage for actors to trip all over. So I'm really happy to see something like Primary Trust, where the stage was empty, except when they needed a piece. Then they would wheel it on, wheel it off, and that was it. And it was beautifully done. And the narration to the audience by someone who had no friends, who had no much of a life, was just handled so beautifully. So that's one. I loved Next to Normal. I will always love Next to Normal. It's one of the saddest, most gut-wrenching plays ever. And it is a musical, but a musical in sort of the style of opera, where that doesn't mean singing and dancing. It means expressing deep emotions through, voice, through singing. And it was interesting because I saw a production of Next to Normal, I guess a couple of years ago at Maceyden. And it was simpler, more intimate. And this one, directed by Alan Paul at Barrington, was really technological. I think the use of video and everything's mic'd. It was a whole different kind of production. But to me, the script is so strong that it worked beautifully in both cases.
May I interrupt you 1 second? If any of the other critics want to react to any of the plays you mentioned, I would really enjoy having a dialogue going on. Sorry, Barbara. Back to Next to Normal, you were.
But I think Macey has a comment.
Yeah, I enjoyed the production. It was a very effective piece of work. It's the first time I ever saw it. I knew very little about it. But I have a technical comment that really disturbed both my wife and myself, that the lead was wonderful, the woman. But when she and most sopranos go up into the higher register, it becomes difficult to understand them, especially when they're mic'd. And I found that disturbing. And therefore, there's probably some of the nuances of the relationships or the ideas that we did not get. But as Barbara said, technologically, it was a wonder. I mean, some wonderful things happened on that stage.
Jeff, Peter, you loved it, didn't, or don't want to talk?
I was not a fan of this production. I think it's a powerful, powerful piece of material. It's just an extraordinary work. And to a large degree, I really admire Alan's daring and bold theatricality. I don't think this was theatrical gimmickry for the sake of theatrical gimmickry. I think Alan had a particular vision in mind. He followed it through consistently. I just think the heart of this show was buried underneath all of that theater technology. I was far, far moved by two other productions of Next to Normal that I saw. The first one at Theatre Works in Hartford, and I have to say the production at the Maceyden, because both of those productions were intimate. For me at least, it let the soul and the agony and the pain, love among these characters come through, and I just didn't feel that at Barrington Stage. That's me. I know I'm alone in this, but sorry.
No, well, no, but while you're alone in this, could you pick on a play that you really loved or really was surprised by, or any other descriptions this summer? And then everyone could pick on you.
The play that surprised me the most was Jessica Province's True Art. I actually hadn't been covering Dorset Theatre Festival for a while, and I hoped to get up there this summer more than I actually wound up doing. The only writing of Jessica's that I had known was Boca, which was done at Barrington Stage, and from my point of view, the less said about Boca, the better. True Art was just, I think it's a really, really good play. It should have a future. And the production, I thought, was just outstanding. The show that got me the most was Survival of the Unfit at Great Barrington Public Theatre. Just, I think, a really powerful, incisive piece of writing, funny in sharp ways, deeply moving in terms of the relationship, especially between the wife and her husband. And I think it was, for me, just a really stimulating evening of theater that moved me in ways few other shows did this summer.
Oh,
The
that's good.
other thing that I would say is, for me, on the whole, in terms of a disappointment, was the season at Chester Theatre Company.
Mhm.
It was a sophomore year for James and Tara, and for me, it was a sophomore jinx, especially a hideous play called Will's Sacrifice that just, for me, was just awful.
Yeah, we all wish them well. Chester is a rather special little theater, and we hope they get their feet properly on the ground. And I'm delighted that you brought up the Great Barrington one, because Jim Frangione has been working in Berkshire for years, developing new plays in 3 different capacities. And he also wrote the play of Flight of the Monarch, as you all know, but the people don't know to have Alan Burroughs in it. So he deserves a lot of applause and credit. So I'm glad you mentioned him. Barbara is back. I think I interrupted her before, and she wants to get her back, her time back. I'm giving it to you.
I just wanted to say, I wanted to say something about Dorset. I agree with Jeff. Dorset does terrific work. Teresa Rebeck does a lot of work there. Anyway, this was Beauty Queen of Leenane I saw, and I was Rebeck who directed. And what I was shocked about was that Christine Nielsen, who is such a brilliant comedienne, was cast as the mother. And it was a whole other way of looking at the mother. It's about a mother-daughter relationship, and it's some of the violence in it is horrible. But to have Nielsen in there, just it kind of, the lighter moments were much lighter, and the violent moments were still violent. But for example, when the mother was doing something she should not have done, sneaking around that the daughter didn't see, Nielsen sort of looked at the audience with sort of a twinkle in her eye and tiptoed around like you see in a cartoon almost, and did this forbidden thing, and then came back again to her rocker, complaining that she really couldn't move and had a lot of pain. And I never imagined the play to be that way. McDonough, writes such violent stuff, such cruel plays, but with her in the lead, to me, it was a terrific choice. So yeah, and then the other thing, I'm just going to throw in one more, and that is The Tender Thing, Alan Pohl's production at Barrington Stage, in which when I first heard what it was about, I thought, this is really gimmicky. I don't know if I want to see it. And it's imagining that Romeo and Juliet did not die and lived to old age, and then Juliet had this terrible disease and didn't want to continue living. And what he did was the script. It wasn't what Alan did. Was actually what the script writer did, was to use only Shakespeare's lines, but they didn't necessarily come from Romeo and Juliet. So each let's say speech that an actor gave was composed of lines from all different Shakespeare plays, which made it impossible to memorize those lines, because they sort of probably knew the whole speech from whatever the play was, and here it was, every line is from somewhere else. But it was so beautifully done. It was such a tender relationship between the older Romeo and Juliet, and the whole setting. Again, it was fairly simple staging. It gave these older people a chance to dance together. You saw the love between them, and it was, I thought, a brilliant concept and perfectly executed.
Thank you on that. I'd like to, I'm so glad that you mentioned the theater. I think next year I'm going to have to include the artistic director with shoe him or her in. I don't remember. And Jeff, I'm so glad you also wrote about Jessica's play. I read your review, which was glowing, and she's a neighbor, so we're particularly happy when neighbors do well. She also has a full-time job for development of Barrington Stage, and she has a young son who's about 13. So she really has her plate full. So I think it's thrilling that you liked her play and see its future. I think Macey wanted to say something.
And so do I when I get a chance, Naomi. I'm trying to get in here as well.
Okay, please feel free to interrupt everybody. This is a friendly group.
I'm going to be a wet blanket. I found A Tender Thing to be repetitive and pretentious.
Hmm.
I'm sorry, who did you say? I wonder if you could speak up a wee bit.
I found A Tender Thing
Oh,
to be repetitive and pretentious.
Ah.
Actually, I was bored.
Hmm.
I really could not follow what the hell they were doing and what they were saying. I knew the premise and thought the premise was wonderful, but not the way this was created.
you don't like to see old people dancing?
I dance. I'm an old person, you know. And another point I'd like to make, Jeff talked about seeing Next to Normal at the Macayden and someplace else. He talked about the intimacy of it. I love the small theaters up here because of the intimacy. I love
Thank you,
swing.
Macey, and you do a nice job of letting us know of various theaters in your area in Sharon and thing, and when they're doing good work. And I think I just today got an email from you about the bridge. I mean,
Bridge Street, Chip and Gus.
yeah, yes.
I'm going to jump in here now, if I may, because
Please.
you've talked about how can you all hear me? Yes?
Yes.
You were talking about some of the things that were the more serious work. I just want to chime in for, I'm a sucker for work that's just fun. And I have to say the play that goes wrong at Majestic just blew me away. They were just, for ensemble work, for laugh a minute, for playing both style and all the jokes that you can possibly imagine. But I also love La Cage aux Folles, and I've talked to a number of people, they didn't particularly care for it, but I thought with Alex Michaels really tapping into the humanity of that character, and that they didn't just play the quick jokes, which I think that musical can easily fall into. Also enjoyed Young Frankenstein and Something Rotten at the Macayden. I know Something Rotten has been on all around the region, so I didn't see the others. I've been trying to see it, and this was a very young and enthusiastic, huge cast on a very small stage, and they did a fantastic job. So I have to say there were a lot of highs in this season, this summer.
I think the
That's
man.
great. And you've been such a trooper, because with a broken arm, you've been going around
Yes.
and elbowing people in to get into the review. I'm sorry, Jeff, you were saying
I
something?
was going to say, I love the enthusiasm and the energy and the guts of the Something Rotten production at the Macayden. It had such spirit and energy. There were two other shows at the Mac that really surprised me. One was their production of Rent, a show that I've never really liked very much. But I thought that this production was just really extraordinary, very sensitive, very cohesive, and moving. And I also was taken by All Shook Up, a musical that I really didn't expect to care for pretty much. But again, I thought the energy and the style and the skill with which this young cast performed, especially the choreography, was just a delight. It was just a wonderful escape from everything else going on out there.
That's an interesting touch, the escape. I think we're all seeking that. Now I'm going to escape to Peter, who has been quiet.
Surprise, surprise.
Yes,
Not
exactly.
not purposely, but I've been curious to hear what everybody else had to say.
Mhm.
For me, my favorite show of the season was Something Rotten at the Macayden. I've seen 7 productions of it, and I love it every single time. It's a musical I never get tired of attending. It's a fascinating concept, a great score, wonderful characters, and at the Macayden, it was younger than I've ever seen it, but it was brilliant. It was just brilliant. John Saunders, who is the artistic director there, directed the production and did a wonderful job, which he also did of a show I thought I would never have to see again as long as I lived, and that was The Fantastics.
Mhm.
I've seen it constantly, it seems to me, since 1960 when it first opened. And his production was sensitive and strong and beautiful. The El Gallo was amazing. He was not just a narrative character, but he was a fascinating participant in the show. And I loved that. When
I'm
it
glad
comes
to hear
to,
that. If I can interrupt 1 second, because it's my prerogative, I have it's because of what you said about the McHayden, because we did not have Saunders on as our artistic director for years. And then you all have been so high on his productions that I invited him this year, and he was wonderful. And his enthusiasm, and we went to see some of the plays, and his enthusiasm. So thank you. Critics do make a difference.
well, it's good to hear. Thank you.
Peter,
But
I have a question for you about the Fantastics. I did not see that production. I unfortunately missed a lot of things this summer. How did they handle the rape ballet? I know that's one of the problems with the play these days.
Well, the play has been, unfortunately, rewritten to remove the word rape.
Oh,
It's been changed to
Abduction.
abduction. And the abduction ballet was wonderful. It did not anticipate the concept of physical rape, but it did everything but. And I thought it was very well presented. How did you feel, Macey?
I directed the Fantastics in high school, and we did the rape ballet. I did not see McHayden's.
Ah,
I've had a very complicated summer. I have not seen as much as I had. Let me say this about the McHayden also. This is going back a couple of years. I love Ragtime. It's one of my favorite shows almost ever. I play it in my car all the time. Anyway, Barrington did a wonderful production of it, and then went to see it at McHayden, and it was so much better because of the intimacy of the theater. We were really involved with what was going on there. I don't go there terribly often. Look, I live in Connecticut, and some of these trips are lengthy. Though I've been to McHayden and go to Pittsfield all the time. But anyway, the plays I've seen there have really been wonderfully done. And I think, again, it is because of the intimacy. The first thing I ever saw there was Hello, Dolly several years ago. And my wife does not like Hello, Dolly, but she loved this production. And I think that speaks well for McHayden and for intimate theaters. Getting back to something that Jeff mentioned about Chester not liking the season, I think I have to disagree with him to an extent. I was not crazy about Real Sacrifice either. I thought it was, I have to watch my language. It was not terribly good, okay? But I think the other three, The Thin Place, Unreconciled in particular, and Big Blue Sky were very, very impressive. I've always liked their work.
I wanted to chime in about the Fantastics because it touches on something else that John Sanders and I were talking about. What's been rewritten is not so much the ballet, but the song that accompanies it. It depends on what you pay, which is where the word rape so generously appeared. And because of the times that we're in, and rightfully so, the song has been rewritten. So the word rape just doesn't appear anywhere in it, and skillfully. And John and I were talking about this because he said to me, this is not the only case, that with almost every show that they do or ask for rights to, they receive constant notices from the licensing agents that involve rewrites of lyrics and dialogue to keep texts and songs current with what the political and social mood is these days. This has always been an issue with me. What do you do with classics of American theater like Kiss Me Kate, like Annie Get Your Gun, which have great scores, but in these days really troublesome issues. John, by the way, is, I'm glad you had him as one of the artistic directors this year. I've had a long and checkered history with the Mac Hayden Theater, going way, way back to the days when I was at the Poughkeepsie Journal. And I covered them for a little bit when I came here to the Eagle. We had a rather harsh parting of the ways after a production of Jesus Christ Superstar, over which I was really not kind. I'm now back, the totally different artistic administration, and I have nothing but respect for the people who run it right now. Even with the shows that I haven't cared for, there's an integrity. I'm finding an integrity to the work that I just had not seen in past years. And the late Jonathan Levin used to encourage me to go back to the Mac. He used to say to me, Jeff, it's not the Mac Hayden you and I used to know. And I finally have, and I'm glad. John is a remarkable individual and a gifted director. I walk out of the theaters, and I've directed and I've been directed, and I walk out of the theater often thinking, how did he do that? I didn't feel that way about the Fantastics. I did not like it. Like Barbara said in her review, I think that production was scaled up to the bigger productions that the Mac Hayden does. And frankly, that's the feeling I had about Next to Normal at Barrington Stage. In a way, I understand why it was put on the main stage. I would have loved to see that show in the smaller theater.
Yeah, smaller theaters are kind of wonderful. When I first came up here, going to the theater, when I hear that they were putting on a big musical, and I thought, how could they? I've seen it on Broadway. How are they going to do it in a small theater, with the bathroom upstairs and that kind of thing? And but that also, that's true not only the plays that are put on, but I'd like a little shout out for the Berkshire Opera, who puts on operas here also in a much more intimate setting than the Metropolitan Opera, and you end up falling in love with them because of that intimacy. I have a question that I'd like. I had a friend once who was a critic for Women's Wear Daily, and there was a play that the critics were giving very high marks to, Coastal Disturbance, and I didn't understand why. And I asked him about it, and he said, look, most people go to the theater once or twice a year on an occasion, but we critics go every night, and we are hungry for creative differences and new things and new ways of looking at things. So who do you write for as a critic? Do you write for your audience? Do you write for your own senses, or a combination of both, I guess is a way that
Combination thereof. Combination.
Anyone else? When we first came up and they were doing I think Fiddler on the Roof and things, I said, how do you do that on a small stage? Well, Barrington Stage did a wonderful job on it. And I think Alan Pohl did a wonderful job with Cajafol this year, particularly also integrating the color blindness concept. But do you keep, Peter, do you think of your audience when you start writing a review?
Not when I start. I write what I feel I need to write about a production because of how I reacted, how I felt, what I thought about it. I do think, and it's been part of my purpose as a critic, is to encourage people to go and see things and make up their own minds. I don't think it's my job to tell people exactly what they should think. I think they should go and make up their own minds about everything. I get a lot of responses to my reviews from people who read me in one place or another. And it's always nice to hear that someone agreed with me. But I'm much more fascinated by the people who don't agree, who think I got it wrong, or that I missed a point, or that I could have done a better job of telling them what the play is about. I try not to write spoilers. Spoilers are those things about a show that alert people as to what they're going to see. And I think people should discover for themselves what's going on the stage. So I try never to write spoilers. Some people like that, some people don't. Some people want to be warned. about
Well,
what's going to happen.
That's an interesting thing. I'd like to get other people's reaction to them, but also I want to thank you because I know also that you make a point of recognizing everyone who is involved in the production, all the technical people as well, and that's I noticed that years ago, and you still keep it up.
I've even thanked stage managers for their work on occasion.
The
When a
what?
show is, I've even thanked stage managers for their work on occasion. When a show is very technically difficult and it comes off perfectly,
Mhm.
it's the stage manager who's making that happen.
Mhm.
And I like to acknowledge that when I see it.
Yeah, no, that's great because I was thinking when I was thinking of all your backgrounds in acting, directing, whatever, the thing that I don't think any of you have ever done is do costume designs, but I might be wrong even on that.
No.
I have.
So I'm
wanna give a
trying to get, we talked about some plays. What plays were the most surprise to you this season, either positive or negative? Jeannie, you
Oh,
cleared your
I
throat?
was, yeah, well, I breathed, yes. Pamela Palmer, I'm a great David Ives fan. I directed one of his works in Taiwan, I guess that's why, but also, and other places. But I
Can
thought
you
that
speak up a little bit? I'm having difficulty with my
you're
computer.
having trouble hearing me?
Yeah,
I was saying Pamela Palmer really surprised me in its form. Because it's sort of a mystery. When you get to the end, you're not sure you understood what you saw, maybe. But I felt that the acting was wonderful and the script was just that clever dialogue. I could.
is that the David
find,
Ives play?
Yes.
yes.
Williamstown. Okay, yeah.
Yes, and so I thought that was very surprising. And then Forgiveness, I thought, was also a very interesting approach that really engaged an audience in a different way.
Yes, I agree with that.
So, what did you all think of Forgiveness?
Should we explain a bit what it is?
I loved it.
Mhm.
We were wrapped for whatever amount of time it was, an hour and a half. You
Mhm.
could not move.
For those of you who didn't see it, does someone want to sum up what, Macey, you want to talk about what Forgiveness did?
Yeah. Mark St. Germain read an article in a paper somewhere that the state of Minnesota has a program where a convicted felon is given the opportunity to plead his or her case to have the charges expunged from their record, depending upon what they have done either in prison or thereafter. 4 witnesses come up and they all have different stories. The audience votes on whether they should be pardoned or not. And these are all true stories. There's a cast of 6 people, as I remember. They play multiple roles. And once the thing gets going, it is impossible but to feel their emotion and just let it sink into you. It was a terrific, terrific experience.
I felt that Forgiveness had a couple of problems it shouldn't have had. The audience at the beginning is told that they are going to have a voice in the production, how it's going to turn out, and that turned out to be an utter lie, and that bothered me. And I talked to Mark St. Germain about it, and he said he tried it the way I would have liked it, and he didn't care for it. The ending of the play, all 4 cases are revealed into their realities for the audience as to how the decision went. And basically, it said to the audience, it doesn't matter how you voted. This is the actual ending, and that's just the way it is. And oh, by the way, you voted the other way. And I felt that we should have had that voice to decide, as we were told we were going to at the beginning, how the play would end. And then we could be told how it actually ended. But instead, he did it in the other direction, and I thought that was wrong.
Well, it was an actual case.
That doesn't matter. This was a drama in the theater, and we are told up front that we have the option to vote and decide on the ending. And that wasn't the truth. That was a lie.
Jeffrey, what is your reaction to what Peter just said?
I had mixed feelings about the play. I understand what Peter is saying. I think these were all true cases. These cases actually happened. And so the outcome is a matter of history, and the outcome is what these judges gave us. I think having the audience vote it's sort of an interesting sociological issue. And I frankly would have been interested in, maybe I will talk to Mark about how the public votes went over the course of the run of the show. If there were any of the released felons, how the votes on each of them went over the course, and how the audience differed from the judges. And I wondered, particularly in one case, if the audience vote was as much because of the issues involved with the particular not defendant, because these were all men and women who had served their time, they were out in the world. But you had actors up there, one of whom is really well known by the audience, Peggy Farr Wilson. She is well liked. And I just wondered how much of the vote for the character that the convicted felon that she played was just because of her and the strength of her performance, rather than the arguments that were waged in or against her favor. So it's a dicey play. For me, it was one of the more interesting pieces of the summer, but not necessarily one of the more memorable.
Well, I want to say that I think one of you must have written a very clear review in thinking about the audience and what you should tell or not tell, because I didn't have the problem Peter had with it, because it turned out to be exactly what I expected. So I must have had a heads up there from one of you, probably, I think maybe from you, Jeff, because I usually read yours first. But so that goes back to the idea of what a critic can do, or a reviewer can do, to help an audience be prepared without necessarily giving away the plot.
Right.
And I thought it's interesting.
I won't write spoilers either, and particularly in this play, I think it was really important to set out what the ground rules of the play are, to just set it out clearly for the reader, what their role is and what it is they're being asked to do. I have to say, though, just one PS here. In terms of social issues, there was another play this summer that dealt with a very complicated, impassioned social issue, Griswold at Bridge Street Theater. Yeah. That to me was just such an exciting piece of theater. It was not only produced and acted well, this was a complicated play dealing with a complicated history. And I think this was just a perfect example of clarity, of how a good playwriting, good directing, and solid acting, and this was another play, three actors, two of whom played multiple roles, in which issues were actually laid out really, really clearly. There was narrative, but it didn't put you to sleep or make you wrestle. It was funny, it was witty, it was insightful, and I loved it because it was a clear demonstration of how you can make real living theater out of social issues. Forgiveness, for me, just sat on a line.
That sounds great. I'm so sorry I didn't see it. You know, they have a limit of what you can see. I'm so glad to hear you talk about the other play, because I was ambivalent about how you deal with voting for and the presentations part of it. I thought at times was like a parlor game, though it was very moving at times. And did any of you see a long time ago in New York, Exonerated, which
yes.
had
long time ago.
Long time ago, and there was the group that put that on, of the groups that help save people on death row.
Right.
And that was, in fact, we got to see it the very last night. People were talking about it so much, and they put 2 folding chairs out for us to see it because it was all sold out. Very powerful and very painful.
Yeah.
But this
Exactly.
was a whole different thing. It wasn't people were going to be sentenced to death. They were already sentenced and served their time, and then after 5 years they could apply, and that's a sort of interesting concept. We have time left, but I do want to save some. I'd like to hear from you about what you're hoping for next season, if you have any dreams or hopes or recommendations, and also a line or two about what you thought the theater audience was this year. I think some of you have written that it was okay on the opening night, but the energies of the audience diminished because houses weren't full and the audience numbers down. I'd like to hear what you thought about all that. Macey, you're trying to say something, yes.
Yeah, but we're not about that. I want to go back a little bit. I want to give a plug to our theater down here in Northwest Connecticut, Sharon Playhouse. Their work has become so much more, what's the word I want? I don't want to say professional because it's always been professional. Exciting. They did a 4-season, 4-show season. They started off with Rock of Ages, which was beautifully produced. Not my kind of music, but really enjoyed the show. And then they did The Prom, which of course has social issues, and that was absolutely wonderful. And then they did a very touching Steel Magnolias, followed by A Good Man, Charlie Brown, which was a good production. I'm not crazy about the show. They are doing a lot of wonderful work. They did a piece called Lifespan of a Fact on like a second theater thing. Very impressive. I know Peter reviews them. I review them. I think other people should come down and just see them and see the kind of work that they are doing.
How about a plug for the group that's coming up? You have the short plays coming up, and you've got a play in it, and you're directing one.
Correct.
Please plug it now.
Okay, so called The Writer's Playground. 8 plays by various authors, most of them local. I have a play in, and all the actors are local, and I'm directing one of them. It runs this Friday and Saturday nights at Sharon Playhouse. Free, no charge. They do ask for donations, and the play I'm doing is a very sweet piece of work, and the play that I wrote has some tough moments in it. I haven't seen the others, but I know some of the playwrights, and I know virtually all the actors. It should be a terrific 2 evenings of work.
That's great. Barbara has her play coming up on October 8th, I believe, or not?
Right, October 8th, right, at 7 at the Zion Lutheran Church. I want to go back to surprises.
Yes.
Okay, well, first of all, about spoilers, I drive myself crazy. I refuse to do any spoilers, and half the time I have no idea what to write in the review because the whole thing would be a spoiler. So I'm always struggling with that. What surprising plays? One, I want to agree with Jeannie on La Cage aux Folles. I had seen the movie. I had never seen I don't think I saw a full production of it. I thought it was silly. I thought it was stereotyped. And then I saw it at Barrington. And this guy, Alex Michaels, who I've never heard of, I've never seen him before. He's the star of RuPaul's Drag Race, apparently, which I have never seen. He was so brilliant that even with all the dazzle of La Cage aux Folles, I could only watch his performance. Because as a man and as a woman, he was so touching. It became something so sad. I loved it. I just said, who is this guy? So that's one. Abe Lincoln in Illinois, talking about classics. What to do with a 1938 hours-long play. And it was so well done. He took 35 characters and brought it back to 11. He had 3 actors playing Lincoln at different times in his life, and it was so relevant in so many ways to today. And it didn't seem like an old, an antique that they had just brought up. So very well done. I was also totally shocked by Mark Dole and Christopher Invar in Boeing Boeing. Here we just saw them in Faith Healer the year before, and it was so serious and such a heavy thing, although Mark had a more comic role than that. But this one, Dole was all over the stage. He was falling over pratfalls, crazy, crazy, insane stuff. And I thought, this is amazing to give these two a license to do the kind of stuff they did and live through it. I love it. It's really good. Oh, and one plug for Jay Sefton in Unreconciled, about an adult talking about his abuse by a priest when he was a child. He played every role. It was a one-man show.
Yeah.
And I was speaking to James Warwick, who's directing Moon for the Misbegotten at the Majestic, and he
He's
said
going to.
on what he saw in Unreconciled, he will be playing it at the Majestic. Will be directing Moon for the Misbegotten at the Majestic, and who he wanted for his lead actor was Jay Sefton, based on what he saw of his performance in Unreconciled. And I have tickets for it because that actor is magnificent.
Well, that's great to hear. I will get the dates and things for you later. By the way, I think Lincoln and also Casual Fall really were outstanding examples of how people glided into different genders and different races, and it all worked. I was smooth. I found it was very sophisticated in its approach to that. It was not a so stop and say, oh, look, that's a man playing a woman, or vice versa. It was really brilliantly done, and I was applaud that. Macey, you have
I have another one, another small theater to talk about. What is now Ancrum Center of the Arts, which used to be the Ancrum Opera House. They did Constellations, which was absolutely wonderful. Very touching, beautifully staged. The two actors were husband and wife, Andrew Nichols and Drew Ledbetter. They do a lot of work. They're involved with Sharon Playhouse. But they did this work at the Ancrum. Ancrum does a very broad, interesting group of work, just like all the other small theaters that I love.
By the way, is there anyone in the audience who has I don't see much in chat, but oh, I see one about forgiveness. Generated more theater conversations among our friends by a lot than any other production all season. So that's great. Why not?
Paula has her hand up.
Okay. Paula, we'll get now that you've been acting and doing criticism too, we'll have to get you on stage with us.
Okay, well, you certainly have Berkshire on stage well represented.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I had a question. Nobody's brought this show up, and maybe because it was awful. So I'm just wondering why it was done. So what about Pipe Dream? Like, you know, that musical that of course was Rodgers and Hammerstein. I'm not quite sure why it was selected. There's a reason we haven't heard of this show. I think because it was pretty awful. Anybody have any thoughts about it?
Yeah, I do.
Right.
Pipe Dream is one of those shows that should never have been written to begin with. It was supposed to be written by Frank Lesser, but he was very busy at the time writing The Most Happy Fella, and he turned it down. And Rodgers and Hammerstein took it over. They had money in it. They ended up pushing out the original producers, which were Fewer and Martin, and producing it themselves. They lost a bundle on it. They didn't like it themselves. They did not like what they had written. They did not like the concept. They did not like the characters. The show is very weak because of that. But it has some of Oscar Hammerstein's best lyrics ever. Brilliant, brilliant work.
So you think the reason that they chose
You're breaking up.
to do that was because of the music?
No.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Do you think the reason they
There
chose
are only
to
a
do
couple
that
of
was
good
because of
songs
the
in it,
music?
but the lyrics are wonderful. The lyrics are very expressive. They are some of the best things that I think Oscar Hammerstein ever wrote. But it's not enough. The characters don't work. The casting of the
Right.
show was interesting. The woman who played the madam of the whorehouse, which is sort of downplayed as a concept, was far too young. She was originated by Helen Traubel, the opera singer. So it was a much bigger voice, a much bigger presentation. And she was ultimately the star. She did have over the title billing, and she was the star of the show. But to have a whorehouse with only 2 whores, which is what they did here, as opposed to 6, is not a very lucrative business. Let's face it. No
Maybe
matter
their
how quick,
productivity was high.
yeah, no matter how quick these women were, they weren't quick enough to make the show work. And it also it diminished the numbers in which they participated. I found the show, I saw it twice, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I went to review it, and then I had a class that was going to see it. So I went with them to see it again, to see if it was better. COVID took its toll on that show. The leading lady did not open the show because she had COVID. But she went back into it by the time I had my class see it. And she and her understudy were identical twins. They were the same look, the same performance. It was a very rigid presentation. And I think that was a bad thing. The show needed a kind of physical freedom that it never had up here. It's not produced often, and it probably shouldn't be, because it's not a very good show. But it's one of 3 flops that Rodgers and Hammerstein wrote. And it came right after The King and I, which was a big hit for them. And just before Flower Drum Song, another big hit. So it was sort of their, oh, let's do this and make a lot of money. John Steinbeck, who wrote the novel on which it was based, wrote it on commission by Fewer and Martin, based on his earlier novel with many of the same characters. And he wrote it to be adapted to a musical specifically. I don't think he understood what a musical did and was and should be. It's almost operatic in its structure and in the diversity of its characters, but it's not operatic in its fluidity. It doesn't really work. It was a shame. I was glad, frankly, to see it. I've known the score for years from an original cast recording, but I had never seen it because it's never done. So I was rather glad to see it. I did send 8 messages to Kate McGuire asking why she chose it. And the answer never came. My class wanted to know.
Which
But
class was this?
this was a class that I teach every summer for Rhodes Scholars. And this was my 3rd class of the summer. And we had chosen Pipe Dream because of its unusualness, the fact that it's never seen. And they all wanted to know why she chose it. And it's a question she never answered.
We have a question in the
I
chat.
think the director answered it in the program. As I recall, the director answered that question.
But it wasn't the director's choice.
Right, but why she wanted to direct it, right?
I think this production for me, Peter, also needed a more mature cast.
Yes.
There was no sense of the life experience that these characters experienced. It was just innocent and clean and fresh. And I know that's always a rap on Rodgers and Hammerstein. But I think it needed this production, among so many other things, this production just needed grit and earthiness and a sense of life experience. I was intrigued by Pipe Dream only because it felt to me, more than any other Rodgers and Hammerstein musical, that the score and text were more closely integrated, it felt to me, or at least it was an attempt to make them one, rather than what you normally get in a musical, even in Rodgers and Hammerstein's best work, dialogue that's a bridge from one hit song to the next. It felt to me a more integrated attempt. It doesn't work, I agree. not even in the City Center's Encores version, which I have the CD of, and I think that's really the only other time it's been produced in New York, if I remember,
Yes,
or
that's
probably
correct.
for that matter anywhere
Almost
else.
anywhere, yes.
We have a question in the chat, Naomi.
I think that was Karen. Paula. No?
No, Joanne Larman says, what play did you find most entertaining? And I don't know if that's addressed to our critics or to everyone who's on screen right now, or online right now.
Okay, so that's a good question for anyone to jump in on.
Something
Depends
rotten.
upon something, I'm gonna say the play that goes wrong.
The question is what?
What play did
did you find most entertaining?
The Prom. The Prom at Sharon.
Okay. Peter?
Something rotten at the Macade.
Barbara?
I guess Boeing.
Jeffrey?
For me, of the summer shows, something's rotten. I have a little problem with the material. I think it slows down in the second act, but this production was just knock your socks off wonderful, and
I can't hear
I loved
anymore.
every minute of it.
Are you
What's
there?
coming up for the fall? Anything? Oh, and Jeannie, did you say what you found most entertaining? I've lost Jeannie.
She said she couldn't hear.
Oh, what play did you find most entertaining?
She can't hear you.
Okay.
She said the play that goes wrong.
Oh, that's right. What are you looking forward to? What's coming up the next month or two? Does anyone have any info on what's going to be opening or?
Well, Galileo's daughter, Wham, is doing that.
Oh, yeah, right.
On end of October. And as I mentioned before, the Majestic is doing Moon for the Misbegotten.
Yes.
Then there's, all the Christmassy shows, but I'm not sure what
Right.
else.
Christmas Carol, that's right. Jeannie's husband was in it last year. I don't know if he's being reprised. We'll see. Peter, do you know of anything that's coming up?
Basically, I'm looking forward to Moon for the Misbegotten because I love the play. I've been told it's being cut somewhat drastically. In full, it runs 3.5 hours. And most audiences today will not sit still for a 3.5 hour play. So I'm curious to see what they've cut.
Yeah, we haven't seen it for a long time, so that'd be
Half Moon. Half Moon.
My husband has been editing me here, and he says a half moon. So not a moon for the misbegotten, but a half moon for the misbegotten. That's who cut it from 3 hours to 1.5. What would you like for next year? Anyone want to throw out any suggestions that we can pepper the artistic directors about?
I think after this season of elections, we should just look forward to a season of happy plays, happy musicals, happy.
Or even
Escape.
a season.
Yes.
How about some good romance? Is that a nice change? Or is that too pedestrian?
Good romance is always welcome.
I think Jeannie at one point thought that there was a cutback in the number of classics put on. I don't know if I agreed with her or not.
I did miss a lot of things, but I know that we had Glass Menagerie was brought back at the Bridge Street, and All My Sons was done at Ghent. But and of course, a lot of the musicals have been around for quite a while. But we have this abundance of new work, and that certainly is incredibly important. But I'd like to see more traditional scripts that and because these new directors, artistic directors, and young talent often have such a new take on it. So I'd like to see us visit some of the classics of the stage as well.
I want to congratulate Jeannie, who has enormous courage. She is giving a course on training amateur actors into how to act and
And Ollie, through Ollie,
what?
through Ollie.
So that would be through Ollie, right? So we have the Ollie players, and we also have the Ollie's arrivée. So we'll see about that. Jeff, do you have any thoughts for next year?
No, I mean, we were talking about romance. We had a really wonderful one last season with Dear Jack, Dear Louise, which I thought was just such an endearing play. I would just like to see a really good, smart comedy. I've always felt that comedy has been such an undervalued, underappreciated form, and
Art form.
writing good comedy is just skill, and performing good comedy well and directing it well is just such an uncommon skill, I think. So I would give anything just a really, really good, solidly written and performed comedy.
Do
Or
you
two
have
or
any
three.
do you have any candidates for it of a classic comedy or not a classic comedy that could be done?
Interestingly enough, and this goes back to an issue that we raised much earlier, in the spring, Ghent Playhouse is doing Lend Me a Tenor, which is a play that we haven't seen a lot of for
Which
an
play?
obvious Lend Me a Tenor, Ken
Oh,
Ludwig,
yes.
which I think is one of the funniest post-World War II American comedies.
Mhm.
We have not seen it done because of sensitivity to a situation in which a white man is asked to put on blackface and sing the role of Othello. Granted, the play is set in the 1930s, but this again has become a very, very sensitive, pointed issue. I'm really curious at the Ghent Playhouse taking the courage to do this. If they do it well, I think it would be a wonderful event. It's such a funny, smart play.
It
Do you
is.
have they sent any corrections for the on the copyright to that play? Do you know?
I don't know.
I don't think they can.
Hmm?
I think
I don't-
the play is about what it's about, and that's just the way it has to be.
uh,
So
I
does
see in
that,
the chat, Naomi, I see
Hmm?
in the chat that Boing Boing is mentioned as a great comedy this past season.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I found it entertaining, but a little dated. But
Mhm.
that was my take on it.
I agree.
yeah, I had
Yeah.
problems with that too, though I'd set up a theater party for it, and it was
Isn't it
very
interesting?
Mhm.
The actress who played the
Right.
airline stewardess for Alitalia turns up in The Weir in
Yes.
just, for me, just an absolutely stunning performance that just shows how much less is more. It's just, and the contrast. It's always wonderful when you can see an actor do that, make that kind of contrast and see it so close together so that it's really notable. Joey Collins also is in the, having been at Barrington Stage this summer in Forgiveness, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
But particularly Stephanie's performance, just the sharp contrast is just
Yeah.
remarkable.
Are there any plays that you would try to avoid seeing because of too personal, and that you would be upset by? Is that I think with the Berkshire on Stage, you have choices about what you see. I presume, Jeffrey, you have to see everything, and I know Peter always used to see everything.
But I do, yes. I make my own assignments, but yes, I do see everything.
So there's not something that you would avoid.
No.
No, I would just suck it up and sit there and examine it and do my work. Sometimes that's really difficult because I've sat through plays that either on the whole or in moments have hit me on a really, really personal level. And I have to find a way to put that into a professional context when I'm writing the play. I'm not ashamed. I don't think I've done it, but it's tricky. And then I have to weigh whether my assessment of the play is being determined by my emotional response to what's being said,
Yeah.
or the material and the presentation. So
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I remember some decades ago, you couldn't walk into a theater in New York and not have someone in the middle of the stage in a hospital bed getting an IV. It was a big year for death on stage, for AIDS and cancer. And I personally was having a family tragedy going on, and it was terrible. I mean, you had to figure out. And in fact, we saw Wit the last night because I had not wanted to see, though Chalfont was so great, because I said I don't want any more AIDS and cancer and people dying in front of me. But I haven't seen that lately. I think we're doing better, right?
We seem to be, although that can be cathartic, and that's a part
Though,
of what.
But with the artistic directors waiting to see the outcome of the election, who knows what next season will bring?
Exactly.
We had a comment in the chat saying somebody needs to do Julius Caesar next year.
Sorry, that's been done.
It may take on different
What was
perspectives.
it? Someone said when something during the Civil War, say the problem is we know how it turned out. So that's a whole other. Anyway, we are coming to the end of our time. I want to thank you. First of all, I want to thank the whole audience for being with us and staying with us. But I really want to thank you, critics. You are so wonderful. When I write you and invite you, usually, within a nanosecond, you're all back and saying yes, yes. It's something that many of the OLLI members look forward to. I know I look forward to it. I think you're a wonderful group, and I know that some of you have asked if we could get together in person again, and yes, we might, but we'll need better technology than we have now. That owl that we used that one year, that had 5 critics, and the owl, and was really, I thought, a disaster. You couldn't hear the voices, and people's elbows were sometimes 5 times the size of someone else's head. So we will do it again. We will have a second act, I hope. Anyone have any last bit of excitement or intelligence to offer?
I do, Naomi.
Yes.
On November 11th, which is a Monday night, the Berkshire Theatre Critics Association will present its 9th annual Berkshire Theatre Awards.
Oh, great. I wanted to ask you about that. Thank you. So it's November, that's Armistice Day, right?
Yes, it is. We always do it on the second Monday of the month of November because it's a day when people have off and people in the theater can actually get up here, be with us in the auditorium, and hopefully receive their awards in person. We look forward to it. We just
I want to
started.
congratulate you and Macey, who are one of the founders, or part of the founders of it.
We're
It's
part
a
of the
wonderful
founders, and
program.
we're the
Anyone who loves
co-hosts.
theater.
And
We're the
co-host.
co-hosts.
Yes, you've done a great job. It's really thrilling when you see various people, actors, directors, put on their resume that they won a Berkey, and it's also nice, the whole thing of all the theater people who don't necessarily know each other get together and applaud each other. It's wonderful. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
It has become a theater community because of the Berkshire Theatre Critics.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
more
Well
and
done.
more people are getting work at other theaters as a result of being seen, heard, and met at the award ceremony.
So is it at the Lutheran Church again, at the Zion?
Yeah.
Zion Lutheran Church at 7 p.m. on Monday, November 11th, and reservations are mandatory.
Could you put down 2 for me?
Sure.
Taking advantage of my moderation here. I do recommend it to others. It really has such a good feel. It's a lovely night. Anyone else have anything that?
I just want to do a shout out to one more theater. Okay?
What?
A shout out to one more theater. I want to talk about Bridge Street. We're talking about classics. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Almost a little.
We were talking about classics before. People would like to see classics. Well, this year they did a stunning glass menagerie and a wonderful Uncle Vanya.
Ah,
They
don't kid around.
The Uncle Vanya ran up here the same time it was running at Lincoln Center, and friends of ours saw the Lincoln Center and said it was terrible, which I've heard time and time and time again. But Bridge Street found the humor in Vanya, and they found the humor in Glass Menagerie, and Lee Strimbeck did a wonderful job. She was not the harridan, but she was forceful, but she loved her children because she loved her children. They do terrific stuff there, period.
They
All right. And we're all going to go see your play at Sharon, okay?
Please do.
Okay. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you. And hold your breath until the spring. We'll start all over again and see how the world has been treating us. Thank you all very much.
And
Bye.
thank you, Naomi, and thank you, Ollie.
Yes, ditto.
What?
Thank you,
Ditto.
Naomi, and thank you, Ollie.
Oh, yeah. It's great. I love you all. And Ollie applauds you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.